Welcome back to the Anchored Podcast, the official podcast of the Classic Learning Test. My name is Soren Schwab, VP of Partnerships here at CLT, and today we are joined by Dr. Chuck Fuller. Dr. Fuller serves as Associate Professor of Christian Studies and Director of the Honors Program at Anderson University in South Carolina. A native of Madisonville, Kentucky, Dr. Fuller came to AU in 2010, following 13 years in full-time pastoral ministry and 1 year of teaching adjunctly at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. Dr. Fuller holds a Bachelor of Arts in Christian Studies from Campbellsville University and holds a Master of Divinity and a Doctor of Philosophy from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Dr. Fuller's primary research is homiletical theology, with additional interests in apologetics and matters of faith and culture. He has authored one book, a theological analysis of the preaching ministry of famed 19th century pastor Phillips Brooks, and he has contributed chapters and articles to several other projects. At Anderson University, Dr. Fuller teaches in the field of apologetics. He is married to Jessie, and they have two children, a daughter, Kaylin, and a son, Ian, and we're so delighted to have him on Anchor today. Welcome, Dr. Fuller.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm super excited about this conversation. As we always do, let's start the Anchored Podcast by talking about your own educational background and journey. Talk to us a little bit about your K-12 education.
Oh, wow. My K-12 education was strictly public school. Growing up in Western Kentucky in the 80s, I don't think we were consciously aware of other options. I say that, and my wife grew up 4 miles from me, and she was homeschooled. And so I don't know why my circle didn't intersect with that circle. It just didn't. And I never imagined that there was a different way to do K-12 education until actually I think I was a youth minister and suddenly had students in the youth ministry that were homeschooled. And my first impression was, what is that? So I was just a normal public school student, K through 12, went to a Baptist college, and that experience in Campbellsville, it did open up some horizons to some options. And now our own children, they are educational mutts. We've done a few options with them through the years because we've moved, but they have been in public schools, magnet schools, Christian school, and they're doing high school at a classical school. That's sort of a hybrid model where they go to the school Tuesday, Thursday, and the rest of it is a home component. And we have really enjoyed the classical learning model for our children in high school.
Wonderful. Well, it's just a reflection of the pluralism in education. Now, there's so many options now for families, which, like you said, for you, it was, well, and the same for me. There were 2 public schools in the city, and you picked the one that was closer. That was kind of those are kind of your options. Did your parents value education? Were you an avid reader? What kind of drew you in? What got you excited kind of in the early days?
That's a great question. So I'm a first generation college student. Neither parents have any college credit at all. In fact, I'm the first person in my entire family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all the way down the line to go to college. Both of my parents' families were poor, Western Kentucky, coal mining situations. But my parents were determined that my brother and I would have good educations. We weren't allowed not to make good grades. It was, if we brought home a B, that was a bad day in our house. And the question for going to college wasn't if, but where.
Wow.
And that was their determination. My father was able to move out of working in the mines and started a career in mine supply, right? But I love my parents a lot for a lot of reasons, but one of the things I've grown to respect and honor them for was their determination that my brother and I would be educated as far as we could go. And I didn't have to worry about, I was scholarship to college, but mom and dad were ready to do whatever it took to make sure my brother and I went to college. And that's just fantastic. It changed, it not only changed my life, my family's life, my brother's life, his family's life, but in a retrospective way, I think it actually changed my parents' lives. Watching my brother and I go to college and graduate and getting to experience things they didn't get to experience. Dad would often ask me questions when I was in college, and sometimes it annoyed me, like, Dad, we just talked on the phone 2 days ago. Why are you pelting me with questions? And then it dawned on me. By my experience, he was sort of vicariously experiencing college, something that he didn't get to do. His story is so fascinating. He had like partial offer of a basketball scholarship to Georgetown College in Kentucky, but couldn't go because he didn't have any way to pay the rest. So he volunteered for the draft and went to Vietnam and sent money home to his parents to pay the bills, and came home and started a career in sales. So yeah, that's sort of the background story to my education. I think what drives me, even today, is I'm a good reader. I'm not a voracious reader. But what drives me is just an insatiable curiosity. And particularly in college years and then into graduate school, it was these curious questions about God, the world, and me. And those questions still sort of drive me. That's what drives me in my teaching career. It's what drives me in research. I'm just really curious, and I'm curious across disciplines. That's what fascinates me about the work of a university, particularly a Christian university, is this sort of cross-pollination of academic disciplines on campus. It just fascinates me to no end. It really, really does. Where at a Christian university, you can have a hub that we think truth has a center and all things relate to it, which means the theologian and the biologist can have really great conversations. And so, yeah, I think what drives me is just my curiosity cannot be satisfied.
Wow, fascinating story of your family too. Thanks for sharing that. I mentioned you had a career in pastoral ministry before you ended up in higher education. What in particular drew you to go into higher education? I know you were an adjunct for a year and then joined Anderson. So was there anything in particular? Was it kind of equipping the next generation of ministers? Was that something that you were passionate about? And maybe also if you can share with us, why Anderson?
Yeah, to some degree. Yeah, it is a passion to equip future ministers. I think for me, I did have a strong calling to ministry at the end of high school. I can remember the first time I met with my advisor, Dr. John Hurchin at Campbellsville University. He's still there. And I saw his Doctor of Philosophy hanging on his wall. And I thought to myself, I think I'd like to do that one day. But I buried that, questioning my abilities, questioning whether or not I could actually get into a program like that. Finished college, went in staff ministry, began seminary, and is really driven toward just being the best equipped pastor I could be. Finished the MDiv, was a pastor at the time. I got married, began having children, and suddenly I could not resist the urge to go back. And I just could not stop going to school. And so went back for the Ph.D. And even then, there was an inkling, I would really like to teach, maybe going to higher ed, but still pretty committed to pastoral ministry. And then when I finished my PhD and started teaching adjunctly, I would walk out of the classroom just having this Moses questioning God moment. Like, what am I doing? Am I supposed to be teaching? I love pastoral ministry, but man, the classroom just lights me up. And so in the middle of this sort of consternation, pastoring in Louisville, the church I pastor is about 1.5 miles from the seminary campus. So there was a lot of integration between the seminary and church work. About 30% of the church were made up of seminary faculty and students. And so, but in the middle of just some real, internal consternation and praying, I had an email from Michael Didway here at Anderson. He said, "Hey, I've got a position opening for a professor post in pastoral ministry. It starts in August. I'll be in Nashville, Tennessee this week. Do you want to talk?" And it's like at that moment, I just knew. I pulled the laptop, took it upstairs, put it on our dining room table, and told Jesse, I said, I've never heard of Anderson, South Carolina, but I think we're about to move there. And she said, hold up. And she went to maps.google.com and she typed in Anderson, South Carolina, Target. And when she knew there's a Target in town, she said, yeah, we can go. And 10
Green
days
light.
Yeah, 10 days later, it was done. And man, it's been great to be part of a university like Anderson. In something of a passion to equip the next generation. But what really drives me is, and what drove me as a pastor, particularly pastoring a church that was in the Arts District of Louisville and close to the seminary, was helping people navigate their questions. And knowing that there really are answers to our questions. But the journey toward arriving at good answers helps to solidify that answer in a way that just giving someone an answer usually can't. So what drives me with students, what drives me in higher education, it's these two things. And my curiosity cannot be satisfied on the one hand. And at the same time and in the same way, I really do have a passion for helping people navigate their questions, their existential questions, questions about God, the world, ourselves, our souls, what it means to be human, what is the good. Some of those we might call them higher order questions. I enjoy tinkering with those questions, but enjoy helping students navigate them.
Well, and I told you kind of in our pre-recording conversation, I went to undergraduate at Christian college and then master's degree Christian college. I had not heard about Anderson, South Carolina. I know there's an Anderson, I think in Indiana as well. I don't know if that one has a target, so glad you ended up at the Anderson in South Carolina. But these last few years, I feel like really Anderson has made it kind of on the map of some of the top Christian universities in the country. And in particular, what I've been hearing more and more about, and that's why I'm so glad you're here, is the honors program at Anderson. A lot of our CLT test takers apply and end up joining the university. So talk to us a little bit about, you're the director of the honors program. What are some of its unique features?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our honors program here really is like the signature undergraduate program that's at the heart of the mission of the University for Faith and Learning. So it's not a great books program, even though we do read the great books. It's not a history of Western philosophy, even though we do peruse those traditions. Rather, it is a program framed after perennial human questions. And so in 190 AD, Tertullian asked this question, what has Athens to do with Jerusalem? Now, for him, that was a rhetorical question because he had a quick answer. Nothing. But he clearly didn't settle the matter once for all. In fact, Augustine would come later and say, hey, tap the brakes, Tertullian. Maybe there's some things to think about here. And so we've actually framed the program out of Tertullian's question. And so the three features would be this unique curriculum where our program is not regular classes with a longer syllabus. This is a unique curriculum and only honor students are in the honors environment. We scaffold courses. We start at Athens and Jerusalem, and 3 courses later, you end up in postmodernity. And so we move through the curriculum that way. We finish with a course in apologetics, which we do cover formal apologetic arguments, but the course is really aimed at where we live now, especially after you've gone on this journey of 2 millennia of thought. What does a compelling and credible articulation of the Christian faith look like, sound like in the 21st century? And so that's the bit of the curricular design. When they finish the scaffolded courses, we offer some electives, and we try to be pretty creative. We've had one in the past called Chemistry and Art. How is it that an artist sometimes has to think like a chemist in order to do their work? We have one this fall called Science and Faith. And our provost, who is a theologian by training, will be put in a classroom with our associate dean of the sciences, Dr. Carrie Koenigstein, and they're going to do all the things that a theologian and a biologist should do when you put them in a classroom together. They're going to have all those conversations. We have courses in ethics at the elective level. I teach one. It's coming this fall. It's simply called Death. And we think about death as a phenomenological, existential, theological, and philosophical problem. And so we peruse literature by agnostics, atheists, and as we always do, we seem to end up with Augustine. So we try to be pretty creative with those electives. So that's a bit of the curricular design. Now, the classroom may be the most unique feature. What we've tried to do is think about the dynamic of a Ph.D. seminar, where it's student-led, inquiry-based, conversation, debate, discussion, and make that accessible to today's undergraduate student. And so the classroom environment is very much circle of chairs, not rows of desks. We simply don't do lectures. There's a place for that in higher education. There's a place for rote learning. There's a place for digesting, grasping, even memorizing material to regurgitate it on an exam. There are places where that has to be done. It's just not what we're doing. And so the classroom time is taken up with discussion, debate, sometimes rigorous debate, conversations, presentations. And so the faculty in the classroom environment, they're on the side, but they invest outside of the classroom, preparing groups for the presentations and debates and discussions, conversations in offices, designing the course in such a way that the professor can sit in the back of the class, sometimes for the entire semester. And so it's poking, it's prodding, it's sometimes being an advocate, sometimes it's even the professor taking on the role of the adversary in order for students to learn. So it's immersive, and we capitalize on those two things. So it's a lot of fun. I get to work with our best students on campus. I get to work with our sharpest faculty. I go to honors faculty retreat every May. There's a table of 10 of us. And I think to myself, goodness, like these guys know things. and so I really do think I have like one of the funnest jobs in higher education.
Wow. No, it sounds and I phrased the question unique features, but sometimes when you ask that, right, it's like, okay, this actually sounds like a carbon copy of all the other ones, but this does seem unique. It does sound different from the other programs that even we featured on the podcast. You've been there since 2010. Needless to say, especially the last 3 to 5 years have seen just tremendous disruption in higher ed, but probably even beyond that. From your perspective as the director of an honors program, as a college professor, are there any trends that you have seen, that you have noticed these last few years at your position at Anderson, and maybe just being a student of higher education?
Yes. Now I'm not an enrollment expert, and I don't dive into the chronicle of higher education every single day. I do try to stay on top of things. So I think that Christian colleges who are committed to quality, who are clear about their mission and adhere to that mission, as much as we perceive threats on the horizon culturally, I think the opportunities are there to match the threats. Insofar as students and their families really are looking for an education that is more than, here are classes that you're going to take that will get you ready to take this job. Now, there is a vocational orientation to education, sure, but there's also a teleological orientation to Christian education. What is this unto? What is this for? And that's what sets apart a Christian university. And I would say that a Christian university really is a university and not like a polyversity. We believe that there's a center to knowledge, that there's a center to truth. And I would even appeal to like John's prologue to his gospel, that when he uses the term logos to refer to Jesus, in some way, it's like he's trolling the Greek thinkers. It's like he's saying, oh, you're after the one thing that makes sense of everything. That's what you're after. I've got it. And it's not it's not an idea. It's a person. And so I think for me, and I think for AU and like-minded schools, being able to build an entire university out from the center of truth, which is Jesus, is really unique. Not only does it provide like a center point for our thinking and a framework for it, it also provides grounds by which the academic disciplines can cross-pollinate. That there's something about viewing the various disciplines through the lens of the Christian gospel that not only puts a foundation under the reasons why you would pursue that, but makes for great conversations. One of the great privileges that I have just working here are lunchtime conversations with an instructor who teaches sculpture and thinking about aesthetics from a Christian position is incredible. Conversations I have with people in communications, behavioral sciences, business fields, and the flourishing of the academic disciplines on a Christian university. It's it's a unique thing. And I think families are looking for that, and students are looking for that, realizing that education is not merely informative, it's formative. And the environment is as formative as the curriculum, and there's more to college than classes. And so I think universities that understand that, and particularly Christian universities that can embrace that and stay true to that mission, I think there's incredible opportunity over the next few years. In fact, I would say this: AU, since COVID, we actually flourished through COVID. We grew through COVID. And some of that was the administration handled COVID in a very clear, balanced way. Of course, we had complaints from various angles about various policies, but we chose our pathway early, and we stuck to our pathway, and we communicated it clearly. And so even if families, if they'd have questions about policies and things, they saw that, hey, we had made our decision, and this is our pathway. We're going to stick to it. We grew through COVID. We've grown post-COVID. And I actually think as we approach over the next few years, a population problem, I think I've seen data where the next 5 years, there literally won't be enough 18-year-olds to fill up colleges. I do think this is the opportunity for Christian colleges who are all about quality, that as the competition gets really, really stiff, there will be winners and losers, but Christian colleges can win that because of the unique thing that we offer.
Fascinating. Yeah. I've thought about that quite a bit. And actually, I'm thinking back to, I think it was February 2020, and I was at a CCCU conference out in San Diego before the world shut down. And one of the speakers gave a presentation about what you just alluded to, kind of the demographic changes, that cliff that is coming. And I mean, it was a little bit of a doomsday presentation, right? Especially for smaller Christian colleges. Now you add on COVID and all the disruption, of course, caused by that. And yet, paradoxically, a lot of Christian universities, Anderson being one of them, are thriving. Mm-hmm. And so, but we also hear schools closing, right? Colleges closing their doors. It seems, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, but it seems like the colleges that in a way doubled down on their identity, on their mission, they seem to be doing pretty well because they still have a value proposition as to why students should come to their school. Mm-hmm. Because there is like you said, a university, mm-hmm. And the colleges that have, and I don't blame them, right? I mean, I think they were doing the best they can, but in a way, they've just tried to kind of carbon copy what some of the schools down the street did in attracting, kind of the Gen Zers. They're closing,
right?
And so, from quote unquote your clientele, right? The students that, do you see that even in the conversations with families, the students that come in, are they becoming more serious? Is there more of a, we come to Anderson and we look for this very thing? Is that something that you're observing?
Yeah, the feature there, I think, as confusion in culture at large increases over whatever issue, there's something to be said for clarity. And even if, if it's something doctrinal, or it's not as though that we require a family should expect everyone to agree on every issue down the line, but it's clarity on the top shelf items that I think is a real attraction. I see this in classes where, just to speak frankly, 10, 12 years ago on any college campus, even Christian college campus, you had a few, not a ton, but you had a few like Richard Dawkins style atheist type folks, and kind of aggressive, logical with a capital L, sort of things. Nowadays, I think you don't have as many of those, but they've been replaced by students who are agnostic. And if they're leaning atheist, it's a more honest atheism, and it's coming from not capital L logic, but from pain. And so even if they don't fully jump into what I'll sometimes with the class call like the Jesus box, they still find something compelling about the vision. A few years ago in the honors apologetics course, we had an atheist student come to the honors program, and she did her big project they have to do a capstone project, and she did the project on, if I were to believe, what would be the reason? And her final answer was something like, it is the lives of those who do believe. She found that compelling, and just a clear vision of who God is, who they are, what the world's about, what the purpose of life is. And she found that clarity. She says if there's one thing, it would be that. She found that compelling, not to mention just sort of the subversive nature of the Christian gospel, that there is a God who hung on a cross and turned the world upside down. That she said she would find those things compelling. So I think it is clarity in the midst of confusion. And then what's clear is a story that's not just credible, it's compelling. And then beyond that, there's an invitation. Hey, not only join the story with your life, but your education into the furthest depths of academic disciplines can be oriented around this Christian vision. That's just attractive. It's even attractive to people who sometimes don't necessarily call themselves Christians, but they see this compelling vision for doing things this way versus that way.
Yeah, yeah, wow. That you mentioned your insatiable curiosity, right? And so even if you're spending that much money on a college degree, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to be somewhere where the people around you are seeking truth,
Mm-hmm.
right? They want to pursue that together, and it seems. And I want to pick your brain a little bit on that as well. Where maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even Christian families maybe weren't quite as hands-on on kind of guiding their children in the college search, and just find wherever you feel like you want to go. And maybe in K-12 we kind of sacrifice to go to Christian K-12, but then after that it's fine, because, and that's kind of the point I'm trying to make, it, like a Texas A&M or maybe some other schools, they weren't Christian schools, but at least they weren't openly hostile towards kind of the Christian faith. Um, I'm wondering, and you were about 30-ish minutes away, I think, from Clemson University, and I'm not trying to disparage them, and especially their Lyceum program. I mean, they have some really, really strong programs there. But when it comes to their curriculum, when it comes to their worldview, it is very, very different. Maybe 20 years ago, it wasn't quite as different as it is now. It, it, has it, for families, has it become more difficult navigating secularity? And is that then maybe leading more Christian families to say, we're going to do whatever it takes to get our kids enrolled at a Christian university?
I think so. And I think universities like us and others, we try to make that decision easier as our academic rankings increase, right? As we continue to invest in the quality of what we're doing, then it dispels some of what I would think is like the myth of the big state school being a better education. And so there are good reasons to go sometimes to state schools, and they offer good educations. And a place like Clemson actually has several really powerful campus ministry organizations that are doing great things. But the difference is we can offer like a truly integrated education. And you're right, secularity it's a challenge. And I think it can be misunderstood. I tinker a lot with Charles Taylor's secularity thesis. And as he, when he first released his big volume, oh goodness, 15 years ago, it was criticized pretty heavily, saying it's not a clear account. It doesn't show logical ramifications. And he'd come back and said that wasn't my point. I told you this is a zigzag account. It could have gone a myriad of different ways. This is just the way it went. And then as people reflected more on this thesis, it's like they began to think that he was onto something that just seemed intuitively right. He had the feel of it right. And I think he makes a couple of really good points that we need to embrace as Christians, that secularity we tend to think of it as like us versus them. This is two distinct teams, and it's like a game, and the clock's ticking, and when the timer goes off, there's going to be a winner and a loser. And Taylor wants to say that's just too simple. It's just too reductionistic, that it really is complex. It's contestable. And I think this is the great opportunity for the Christian faith and Christian universities, that everybody says is cross-pressured, that those who aren't theists or not Christians or don't believe, they're still sort of haunted by a sense of the possibility of believing in something transcendent. And those of us who do believe are always tempted by the possibility of not believing. And I think where in a secular university environment, you can have those conversations to the side, but you can't have those conversations in the center of the curriculum. And I actually think in interactions that I have with colleagues and some speaking that I've done at different universities and state universities, I think I can make an argument that a Christian university is, in a sense, more academically free than those places because we can actually peruse life's hardest, deepest questions with really without boundaries. We can openly discuss the cross pressures that we feel and that our students feel, acknowledging, no, these pressures are not artificial. They're not being imposed on you. This is what it is to be human. To ask these really hard questions about transcendence and God and evil and plurality and these kinds of things, and we can just put them on the table, right? Where in some environments they simply can't do that by policy, and so yeah, I think navigating secularity is a challenge, but I think the Christian university is really, really well equipped to do it because we can ask the hard questions and acknowledge that the hard questions are actually real questions.
Wow. Yeah, it's really powerful, Dr. Fuller. I'm when you mentioned the atheist student, right, that was able to and felt safe enough at a Christian school, right, felt safe enough to, even in her thesis, in her capstone, to talk about this, to wrestle with it, and being surrounded by believers. I assume most students probably were, but that respectfully listened to her and loved her. I mean, that's really, really special to have that. And I don't mean to presume, but I wonder if it were flipped, right? If the Christian school and we're at the secular university, if that were the same. Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate this conversation. Again, we're here with Dr. Chuck Fuller, who serves as the Associate Professor of Christian Studies and Director of the Honors Program at Anderson. We, of course, have one last question that we always ask, and I can't forget that because I'm sure you prepared for it. We always end it with this last question here. If there's one text or one book that has been most impactful in your life, what would it be and why?
I've been thinking about this question for 2 days.
He hasn't been sleeping, poor man.
Like 3 answers to it. So, okay, this book, I don't think it's necessarily a great book, but it was given to me at a time in my life when I really needed it. I'm a junior in college. I'm on the leadership council of our Baptist Collegiate Ministry. I'm the president-elect of that ministry for my senior year. I'm a Christian Studies major, and I'm having very real doubts about my faith. Doubts that have been lingering since high school. It's probably as much my fault as anyone else's fault that I didn't feel comfortable asking the questions that I had. And so my residence director gave all the RAs this little book by Josh McDowell called More Than a Carpenter, and it walks through the trilemma, Lord, Liar, Lunatic. And he gave this to me to equip us, right, in working with students. And I can remember sitting on my bed in my dormitory at Campbellsville University and reading this in one sitting. And the effect was twofold. First of all, it just sort of settled me. It didn't answer like all my questions, but it started me down a pathway to think, hey, Christians have actually been thinking about these for a very long time. I'm not the first person to ask these questions. And there are ways to find answers. So there's like a settledness, which was good. The other byproduct was I can remember like standing up from my bed thinking, I have the answer, right? And so it was significant positively that it settled me and started me on a journey to learn to navigate questions. Negatively, as man, I'm 20 years old, right? I probably needed to tap the brakes a little bit. Suddenly thinking that I had all the answers to everything because I'd read a 90-page book. And so, but at that time in my life, that was exactly what I needed to just as like lesson 1 in learning to navigate questions. So that book actually, again, it's not like a book I would just highly recommend to a lot of people, but it hit me at a particular point in life when I needed it. Secondly, is a book that I read some not long ago. Probably read it first 8 years ago. It's by Julian Barnes, and I stumbled across it by reading some material from James K. A. Smith. And Julian Barnes is this award-winning agnostic British novelist. He's funny. He's brash. He wrote a book, Nothing to be Frightened of, and it is an agnostic um, thinking about the deaths of his grandparents and parents. And the nothing to be frightened of is, from his worldview, he acknowledges that he should have nothing to be frightened of, but it's the nothing that he's frightened of.
Hmm.
And I found this book not only articulated some of the doubts I had in my younger years, but also it just seemed to resonate with our students. And he opens the book like this. The first phrase in the book is, "I don't believe in God, but I miss him." And I found that to be maybe the most precise like definition of the way folks are like feeling these days about transcendence. And so this is the book we read. This is our first book in the death class that I teach in the fall. And it's like reading the book of Ecclesiastes without the last chapter, right? It's asking all the right questions. And it's like, I read this book and I find myself praying for the author. It's like in scripture, like, "You're not far from the kingdom, man. Keep asking the questions." And he will really chide those who claim to be Christians but don't have any teeth in their faith. He says things like, religion should stain every part of your life. If you're going to believe it, really believe it. Echoing kind of like what Tom Holland would say in the Dominion book, and even on YouTube stuff. He will look at Christians and say, I don't necessarily believe what you believe, but you should really believe it. You believe some audacious things, so you should really believe it. And so I found that book to be both really unsettling and also in a way really helpful. The third one I'll throw at you is just, you said I could only name the Bible if I did something specific. When I first really grasped the argument of 1 Corinthians 15, and it struck me that resurrection is not like icing on the top of our cake, that resurrection is the cake, and that Christ's resurrection is first fruits, meaning there are many more coming in like kind. I can remember, it was actually early in my pastoral ministry where I really just sat in 1 Corinthians 15, and I've never gotten over that chapter. The hope of the resurrection of the dead. Again, it's not just like a logical consequence of what we believe. It's not merely the nice little shiny thing part, but it is the substance of our faith, the resurrection of the dead. I cannot get over 1 Corinthians 15 and the closing shout, "Oh death, where is your sting?" Paul makes fun of death at the end of that chapter. That's wild. So there's my three. How's that?
Well, I forgive you for choosing three because now I have a lot of reading to do. Thank you for those recommendations. I don't believe in God, but I miss him. That's going to stick with me for a while. So I really appreciate your sharing, Dr. Fuller, and just very grateful for you being on Anchor today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.